John and our praise team for leading us faithfully this morning, and it's a beautiful Christmas day that God has given to us. Even though it may be raining outside, we know the reason why we're here. Throughout the world, people have all kinds of traditions when it comes to Christmas. So I decided to do some research. I went to a very reputable source like Google to figure out what people do. In Norway, they hide their brooms on Christmas Eve because, according to tradition, did anybody know that in Norway? Anybody been to Norway? Okay. So who knows? It's because witches are out on Christmas Eve, so you can't find a broom in Norway. In South Africa, children look forward to fried caterpillars or Christmas caterpillars on Christmas Day. I didn't know that. Anybody else has heard that? No? Okay, all right. If you see a South African person, ask them about the caterpillars. Now in India, where I grew up, this one I can definitely verify. Where I grew up, we sang Christmas carols on Christmas Eve. But don't misunderstand. It was not just like we're going from, nursing homes or retirement homes or whatever, or street corners or at the mall. No, we sang home to home. Every person in the church, every member, we would have the master list, and it would begin about 8 o'clock in the evening. And we had several teams to go different sections of town. And we would start, and sometimes we would not be finished until 6 o'clock in the morning. Am I right? I don't know how it was, if it was similar. Okay, yeah. So see, there's a verification. Yes, that is true. We did do things like that. Don't worry, we're not going to start that tradition here. Here's the funny thing. If we didn't come to someone's home, that would be like phone calls to the pastor. It was bad. It was bad. And they wanted you to eat. Every home you went to, they would lay out the feast, but you ate every home so far, which has been like 20, 30 already, and they still want you to drink coffee and tea, and it's like, no, we got to go. We have still got 10 more houses. Now, here's the great part about this. I don't know if it's great or not. I was surprised when I came to America that there are no Christmas Day services. I asked my brother, I said, where do we go for service? He said, here we do the friends and family, so we don't have services. I said, oh, wow, Americans really love their friends and family. So, but back home, 9 o'clock, Christmas Day would be Christmas service. So imagine how that service looked like. People were half asleep because most of us who were in the Christmas carols, we would be half asleep because we just got home at 6 o'clock in the morning, barely changed, headed to church, and the other half were asleep because we woke them up. So there was this very interesting service. And so, but anyways, these are all traditions, and traditions are great. I mean, this year people have been talking about doing things differently and all that stuff. But traditions are good. But sometimes traditions can overshadow the truth. I want to focus on that aspect in a very different way. And when that happens, when tradition overshadows the truth, we end up with religion, and we end up with religious authorities, religious leaders. In our series called Greater, we've looked at how Jesus was greater than all the rulers, all the power brokers of the world in which he was born. We saw how he was greater than Rome. We saw how he was greater than Herod. But today we're going to see how Jesus was even greater than all the religious power brokers of the world. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and find Matthew chapter 2. Same passage we looked at last week, but we're going to look at it again, but find a different character to focus on. And as you're finding this, here's the main point of today's message. Jesus did not come to fit into our religious traditions. He came to bring us into a relationship with the living God. Jesus did not come to be shown his place. He came to tear down that curtain in the temple from top to bottom so that we can come now to the throne of grace. It's by his blood the way has been made. So, yes, Christianity is a religion, but it's so much more. It's a relationship with the living God through Jesus Christ. So let's begin. Matthew chapter 2, starting in verse 1. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. Now, if you remember last week, this was the same passage we used, but our focus was on how Herod tried to cancel Christmas. He tried to cancel Christmas by taking out Jesus Christ, although he couldn't. This was God's foreordained plan. And yet, he tried to kill every male child 2 years or younger in Bethlehem and surrounding districts. He tried to cancel Christmas. But in the same passage, we see another group of people who also tried to cancel Christmas. And they were the religious authorities. Now, next to Rome and the Roman Empire and Herod and his kingdom, the religious authorities were the power brokers of the world. So there you have Rome with Augustus Caesar that controls the entire world. Then you have King Herod who controls Palestine. He is the king of the Jews. But then you had the religious leaders. They were the next in charge, the religious power brokers. In the passage we just read, the religious authorities were on Herod's beck and call. Listen again to verse 4. When Herod sees these wise men looking for the star, knocking on his door, listen to verse 4, he gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together. Now they were at his beck and call. He said, come on in. And they all filed in. Why? Because he was the king. Why? Because he controlled the appointment of the high priest. Why? Because he built the temple for them. Remember, it was Solomon's temple, but it was Herod who expanded and rebuilt the temple. It's because Herod was in charge. He maintained the peace in that region. He was that buffer between Rome and the people. So when Herod says, I need all the chief priests and the scribes here now, they all were on the double. Here we are. What do you need, sir? And he asked them the question in verse 5, where is this? Where is the Christ to be born? And listen to their answer in verse 5. They said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet. They gave him the right answer. Now, I'm going to explain to you who the chief priests were and who were the scribes in just a few moments. We're going to look at them very carefully because there are more categories there. But just for now, I want you to remember the chief priests represented the temple, the scribes represented lay people. They were religious leaders. One were for the temple, one were outside the temple. Herod asked both groups to show up, and they did. And they gave the right answer. In fact, they even quoted from Micah chapter 5 and verse 2. In verse 6, it says right here in Matthew chapter 2, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Is that accurate? Yes, it is. The chief priests, temple folks, the scribes, outside people, they both gave the same answer, the right answer. But what was Herod's response? Listen to verse 7. Then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men. Secretly? Why did he have to secretly call the wise men? He secretly called the wise men, determined from them what time the star appeared. Wait a minute. Why the secret? Why did he not just in front of everybody ask that question? Where is this star? Where is this King of the Jews? Where is he going to be born? No, but he secretly does that. Why did that happen? I believe Herod knew where the chief priests and the scribes stood. In fact, he knew in their tone. Yes, they gave the right answer, but they didn't believe the answer. Are y'all getting this? They gave the right answer, but to them it was just a legend. Where is the King of the Jews? Well, in the book it says here. Do you believe that? Well, King, there are a lot of legends out there. There are a lot of legends about this suffering servant is going to come, this one who will be bruised for our iniquities, whose chastisement of our peace would be upon him. We've heard all this, but we don't know for sure what's happening. But how about the wise men? Don't you see these wise men? King, we see a lot of wise men. We see a lot of magi. The magi, they're a bunch of weirdos. I mean, just look at them. You can't trust them. They go around anointing kings, and they go around doing all their weird rituals. And King, they're stargazers. Oh, look how many stars are up there. Which king do you want? I mean, he can make anything out of the stars. So you're not going to go investigate? I mean, if you want us to, but really, honestly, it's nothing. Just ignore them, they'll go away. Can you imagine that? Herod invites or commands, really, the chief priests and the scribes to come together, and they give the right answer, except they don't believe. It could also be something else. Maybe they do believe. Maybe the chief priests and the scribes did believe that, yes, something is happening, but it was too risky. If we go and find this King of the Jews, and if this really is the case, and if prophecy is really being fulfilled, what happens to us? Does that mean that the temple stops? Does that mean that all the establishment has to be shaken? Oh, we can't do that. Now, just because God sent someone, we'll see how things turn out. So Herod actually secretly meets with the wise men and says, please find out. And when you find out, let me know so I can also come and worship him. And here's what I believe. This is my opinion. Initially, Herod probably was sincere. But eventually, his old fear took over, and he tried to kill the baby Jesus. Initially, he really wanted to know the truth. Is this it? But what really gets me here, for the purpose of our message, is that by their refusal to act, the chief priests and the scribes were going to cancel the first Christmas. I mean, think about it. People come to your doorstep saying, we're following the star, prophecies are lining up, I think the king is here. At least investigate. Are you with me on that? At least send like 3 or 4 people and say, okay, take some money, go to Bethlehem, follow these guys, figure out if this is really the thing. If it's not, just come back home. It's only 6 miles away. And yet the chief priests and the scribes did nothing. You know what they were doing? By their inaction, they were trying to cancel that first Christmas. By the way, don't miss this. This is very important. You braved the weather, you came. Satan has been trying to cancel Christmas ever since the beginning of time. Ever since the beginning of time. I find it very interesting, by the way, how people are so willing and so quick to shut down Christmas. They're so quick to redefine Christmas. It nauseates me when I hear someone else say, this year Christmas may look a little different. Says you? Don't misunderstand me. I'm all for being careful. I'm all for washing your hands. We should be doing that anyways. But what annoys me the most is because we're using spiritual lingo, because it's really not about all this other stuff anyways. It's not about the Christmas tree. It's not even about all the presents and all that stuff. Hey, listen, we can come back to this later on. You are a fool. Go back to the east and look around. Many churches that never opened up, they were told you can come back to it once this whole thing is over. Do you understand that not everybody has a pure motive? Do you understand that there are sinister forces who want to destroy Christianity? And if your faith is not on fire, don't try to tell me how to have my faith. Scientific, I'll eat your lunch any day. Don't go there with me. I know about science. I know about being careful. I know about taking precautions. But to think that with just words we can cancel Christmas? And the saddest part is church folks. Church folks who are okay with this. Hey, look, I mean, I'm in it, but, but. Give me a break. And then, hey, Pastor, I'm your friend. And because I'm your friend, I want to talk to you about this. And, hey, look, I love you, and I know what you're trying to do. But I want you to understand, you're my friend, and that's why I'm telling you, I think you overestimated our friendship. We come from a tradition where we walked away from our families, wealth, everything. Do you really think your friendship is going to make us close church? I'm sorry. I'm your friend. I'll do anything for you, but if you don't come between me and Christ and my relationship with Him and my desire to celebrate Christmas, I'm sorry. You're not even in the universe there. How do people think that I can just influence this and this is going to happen? Shame on you if you are one of them. If your faith is weak, get alone with God and say, God, I'm scared, I'm worried, I hear this, I hear that, but don't try to come and say, we need to cancel. We're living in a cancel culture, are we not? How many of y'all know what cancel culture is? Cancel culture says this on social media: if you don't like somebody, you can cancel them. People are trying to cancel Christ. It's not just about coming together and singing Christmas carols. Folks, the world, the flesh, the devil does not like Christ. His coming, ever since the beginning of time, Satan has been taking every possible attempt to shut him out. And even after he came, again, what we're seeing here is the same thing happening. So, very quickly, who were these religious authorities? When the passage says chief priests and scribes of the people, but altogether there were four major groups, with some subgroups here and there. I'm going to quickly walk through them. The first major group is priests and Levites. The second group were the Sadducees. Even though Matthew chapter 2 doesn't talk about them, that's the second group. The third group were the Pharisees. Again, Matthew doesn't talk about them, but they're there, and I'll show you that in just a moment. And the last group were the scribes. They are definitely mentioned. Remember, Herod calls the chief priests and the scribes of the people together. So let's begin. First group, who were the priests and the Levites? As you know from the Old Testament, the priests belonged to the tribe of Levi. They were descendants of Aaron. Along with the Levites, they were the ritual specialists. They were the mediators between God and people. The priests were the ones who did the sacrifices. They didn't speak to the people, but they did the sacrifices that spoke to God. They examined the sacrifices to make sure everything was pure and kosher, didn't have any imperfections, and then they would offer that sacrifice. The Levites did more the policing, the administration of the temple precincts. They were the ones who would sing. They were the ones who would, shh, let's keep it down, please. We're in the temple. That's their job. But the priests and the Levites, they were special people. Under Moses' supervision, under Aaron's leadership, the standards were extremely high for the priests and the Levites. Let me give you one example. In Exodus 28, verse 36, listen to what God said to them. You shall also make a plate of pure gold and engrave on it, like the engraving of a signet, holiness to the Lord. And you shall put it on a blue cord, that it may be on the turban. It shall be on the front of the turban, so it shall be on Aaron's forehead. So when the priest would walk, the words would shine. Holiness unto the Lord. Holiness unto the Lord. I mean, that was the forefront of their worship. The Levites were supporting the priest. Holiness unto the Lord. But keep in mind, through the years, through the centuries, the priesthood, the Levites had become corrupted. In fact, it was so bad that in 174 BC, a man by the name of Jason had actually bribed the Seleucid king, Antiochus Epiphanes, to be the high priest. He was a Levite, but he actually paid money to become the high priest. Can you imagine doing that to Moses? Can you imagine anybody going up to Aaron in the wilderness and saying, well, they did it one time, but what if I imagine them going to him and saying, hey, listen, here's some money. Can I be the next high priest? I mean, God would strike them dead. That would never happen. But the priesthood, but the Levites, they had become so corrupted. In fact, 3 years later, a man by the name of Menelaus, who was not even a Levite, actually paid to become the high priest. I mean, so corrupted. And after that, the Hasmonean family of priests controlled the positions, and the Levites were no different. Does that mean that every priest at the time of Jesus and every Levite were corrupted? No, there were some good ones. Think about Zechariah. Remember Zechariah, who was the husband of Elizabeth, and later John the Baptist was born? He was a good man. He was a priest who actually obeyed God, who feared God, who desired to walk in holiness. But as a whole, the priesthood was corrupt. As a whole, the Levites had become corrupted. Let me give you an example of that. Remember the parable of the Good Samaritan? Man was going from Jerusalem to Jericho. He fell among thieves, and they beat him up, and they stole everything from him, and they left him naked to die. And who was the first one to come? The priest. And the priest went around that man. Who was the second one to come? The Levite. Isn't that amazing that Jesus, in this famous parable, reprimands both the priest and the Levite? What Jesus was saying is this: your people are suffering, they're dying, and you are skirting around them as you're headed to your temple to do your thing. And guess who stopped and helped that man? A Samaritan, a Gentile, a person you wouldn't even want their shadow upon you as a Jewish person. You see, the priesthood had become corrupt. The Levites were corrupt. But how about the Sadducees? How do they fit in all of this? The first time we hear about the Sadducees is around 135, 104 BC under a man by the name of John Hyrcanus, again coming from the Hasmonean family. We hear about the Sadducees, this ruling class. They were kind of Jewish royalty, nobility. They claimed that they were the righteous ones. They claimed that they went back to Zadok, the righteous high priest of Israel. Who knows if that was the case? One thing we do know for sure, they were cruel. If somebody opposed them, guess what happened? You would die. The Sadducees at one time crucified 800 Pharisees because they opposed them. The Sadducees were rulers. The Sadducees controlled the temple. So yes, you could be a priest, but if you want to be a chief priest, definitely if you want to be a high priest, you have to be a Sadducee. So if you're not part of the Sadducee family and you say, I would like to put my name in the hat, it's not happening. You're not a Sadducee. That's not possible. And so these were the Sadducees. In 37 BC, with the coming of Herod the king, the high priesthood became a political appointment under Rome's supervision, and the Sadducees were completely in charge. And by the way, it was all about money. It was all about the money. And how would you describe them? You would describe them as theological liberals. If you know what I mean by that, they didn't believe. They didn't believe in the resurrection. If you all grew up in Bible school and Sunday school, why were the Sadducees sad to see? Because they did not believe in the resurrection from the dead. They did not believe in angels. They did not believe in the Spirit. And the chief priest and the high priest, can you believe they were Sadducees? So when you have a prophecy talking about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, but you don't believe in the resurrection, something else very quickly. These Sadducees, they often tried to oppose Jesus in his ministry. They had their own traditions regarding the Torah, and they tried to confront Jesus about the resurrection. Remember, they came to Jesus and said, what if a woman married this man, and then he dies, and then she marries his brother, and he dies, and then goes on for 7 of them? Their big question was, in heaven, whose wife will she be? What a great question. What a waste of time. I mean, the Son of God is here, came to give his life for you, and the best he can come up with is who will we have the conjugal rights? And Jesus answered to them very clearly, in the resurrection there will not be any giving in marriage. But then he said something in Matthew 23:22. He said, God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. What he was telling to them is, you Sadducees, you're dead. You don't even know it. You see, these were the Sadducees. It's because of this, many of the Jewish people would go to the temple, but they would know this is run by the Sadducees. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's elaborate. But it's all corrupt. It's all about them. Look at the Sadducees. They don't believe anything. Have y'all heard that? Man, some of those mainline churches, they don't believe anything. Sadducees. The chief priests came from the line of the Sadducees. So when Herod called them, guess who came? The Sadducees came. But another group that I want to mention very quickly were the Pharisees. Who were they? Unlike the Sadducees and the priests who were involved in the temple, the Pharisees were mostly a lay movement of people. A lay movement. They were not temple authorities. They tried to live a pious life. They believed in the right doctrine, whereas the Sadducees and the chief priests and the high priest would not believe in the resurrection. They would not believe in the angels. They would not believe in miracles. The Pharisees did. They advocated a simple lifestyle. They believed in what's known as table fellowship. You know what that means? They told the people, this temple is good. Go to the temple. Go. Offer sacrifices, but don't forget, it's corrupt. It's built by Herod. Herod is not even one of us. It's run by the Sadducees. Look at Annas. Look at Caiaphas. These people, they don't believe. Look at the priests. They don't know the word. They don't know the Torah. No. God desires holiness in your home. Your home should be the temple. Your dining table should be the altar. What you put inside of you is what makes you holy. So everything that you eat should be just right. And by the way, what did Jesus say to them? It's not what goes inside the man that makes him holy. It's what comes out of the man. He turned it upside down and said, oh, why do you eat with tax collectors and sinners? Because who you're around affects your holiness. And Jesus said, I didn't come to save those who are whole. I came for those who are sick. The sick are the ones who need the physician. You see, the Pharisees hated him because Jesus said exactly what they were saying, except he didn't go along with them. In fact, Jesus called them whitewashed tombs. He called them blind guides. He called them hypocrites. He even said in Matthew 5:20, unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, I'm going to talk about the scribes in just a moment, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. They would often come to Jesus and say, why don't you keep the Sabbath? He said, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. I made the Sabbath. You want me to keep the Sabbath? He said, how dare he? He's blaspheming. You see, so here you have the Pharisees, the good guys. Remember, Paul was a Pharisee. And yet, when it came to Jesus Christ, they could not accept him. Now, who were the scribes? This is the final category here. These were part of the Pharisees. The scribes were not part of the priests. The scribes were not part of the Levites. The scribes were not part of the Sadducees. The scribes were part of the Pharisee group. They were people who interpreted and taught the law to the people. So people would go to the temple, and the priest would say, oh, for this and your family, you're going to have to sacrifice 2 lambs. And because of that sin that you just confessed, we need 3 or 4 doves and pigeons and whatever, and some fruits and vegetables. Yeah, you can do that. The man would be like, I don't have anything. I'm broke. I can't do all that. They would go and find a scribe. Remember, the Pharisees, scribes, coming out of the same group. They were not temple people. And the scribe would say, no worries. Let me help you out. So, in your case, the priest doesn't know what he's talking about. All you have to do is do this, this, and this, and it's all good. Oh, thank you. Thank you, scribe. These priests, they're so ignorant. All they do is they do the sacrifices, and they take all the money, and they eat all the meat, and they don't care about the people. And the Sadducees, the chief priests and the high priests, we know how they stand, but thank you, scribes. You guys saved the day. We're so grateful to you. And we belonged in the Pharisees too. You know, we're part of the Pharisee movement. How do you think the scribes felt when everybody is looking up to them? Man, they are the saviors. They are the ones who help you out when the temple and the priests don't know what they're talking about. Listen to what Jesus said about them. Ready? Matthew chapter 12, verse 38. Then Jesus said to them in his teaching, beware of the scribes who desire to go around in long robes, love greetings in the marketplaces, the best seats in the synagogues, and the best places at feasts. I mean, of course, if a scribe shows up at your daughter's wedding, what are you going to do? It's like, oh, you really helped me a couple of years ago when I was, didn't have anything and the temple was gouging us. Man, you helped us out. Come on, you first in line in the buffet. And Jesus said, be careful about them. By the way, Jesus didn't make friends. He should have read Dale Carnegie, making friends, influencing people. He's like, I don't like the chief priests. I don't like the scribes. I don't like the Pharisees. I don't like the Sadducees. I mean, every one of them. They all wanted him to be like, come over our side. Be like us. We'll help you. And listen to what he said about the scribes. He said, they devour widows' houses, and for a pretense they make long prayers. And by the way, in Matthew 23:29, he cast woes against the scribes and the Pharisees. Remember, he already talked about the Sadducees. He already dealt with the chief priests and the high priests. But then the scribes and the Pharisees, the outside temple people, Jesus did not spare them. He called them hypocrites. Because you build the tombs of the prophets and you adorn the monuments of the righteous, and you say, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Therefore you are witnesses against yourselves that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. He said, you're no different. Oh, if we were there back in the day, we would have stood for righteousness. No, you wouldn't. What is the point of all of this? When Jesus came, don't miss this, he did not come to find his little spot in their religious tradition. He did not come, gentle Jesus, meek and mild. All right, priest, show me where I need to stand. Sadducees, if you ever give me a little chance, I want to speak to the people. No, what did Jesus do when he went into the temple? He made a cord of whip and he drove out the money changers, and he said, this is my Father's house of prayer, and you made it into a den of thieves. So the temple folks hated him. And how about the Pharisees? They said, oh, we like this guy, but he doesn't keep the Sabbath. He doesn't wash his hands. He doesn't realize there are tax collectors and prostitutes sitting with him. He heals on the Sabbath. And Jesus said, you are whitewashed tombs. You are hypocrites. You are blind guides. We have our scribes. We have our smart ones. And he said, those walking around with those long robes, they make long prayers. At the same time, they're devouring widows' houses. Them? Here's the thing, folks. When you follow Jesus Christ, you realize it's not about religion, because he transcends religion. He came to give us a relationship with the living God. Where if you try to fit him into your category and say, this is where Jesus you belong, and that's what our culture is doing right now. Did you know that? And many Christians are going along with it. We're canceling the coming of Christ. Well, it's not really canceling. What we're saying right now, you can always come back to it. It never works that way. many people's faith will never come back to it. Did you know that? If you had asked me about 4 months ago, where will we be or what's going to happen, I would have told you, oh, we'll all bounce back, it'll all be good. The more I talk to people, the more I converse with people, the more I talk to even pastors and leaders, their faith has been so shaken, they don't believe they will ever bounce back. And that's sad. And yet we're buying into the same rhetoric as cancel it, cancel it, cancel it. You see, God has a plan. Well, the chief priests and the scribes who tried to cancel the coming of Jesus didn't realize that Jesus came anyways. And the chief priest, Caiaphas, he stood up and he said, he used a big word. He said, it is expedient that one man should die for the whole nation than for the whole nation to perish. Remember that? He said that. You know what the Bible says? He didn't realize, being the high priest, he actually prophesied that Jesus was coming to die for us. Amazing. What the world is trying to do, this is why I don't want us to live in fear. The world is trying to tell you, this is how things will be. It is for Christians. Take your precautions. Don't wash your hands. Keep your distance if you have to. Be careful. All those things are fine. But listen, we as Christians need to stand up and say, no, we're not going to abide. We're going to stand for the truth. We're not going to stop assembling. Because God is doing something. I want us to be part of that plan. I want this church to be part of His plan. And when it came time to crucify Jesus, what is amazing is all of them came together. The priests, the Levites, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the scribes, they all said in one accord, crucify him. The world has a sense of unity. We all are together in this. I'm sorry, I'm not with you on that. Don't count me in. I'm not part of that unity. We're all together. We're all in this together, guys. I'm sorry, I'm not in that together. I'm not part of that group. Well, are you being unscientific? Are you being reckless? No, I'm smarter than that. But no. But I'm trying to be a friend and I'm trying to help you out. Well, you overestimated our friendship. Because my loyalty is not to you, it's to Jesus Christ. And church will meet. And we will celebrate. And we'll be careful. But that doesn't change. What you need to do is get before God and examine your faith. And ask yourself, are you where you need to be spiritually? Or did you just try to cancel Christmas? What has happened to us? I would rather be with those shepherds and those weirdos, those magi's, than with the chief priests and the scribes who said, yeah, it's in the book, but, it's just a legend. They try to cancel the coming of Christ. Where do you stand? I fear for our nation. I do. Because our nation's success is on that foundational principle, which is in God we trust. That's where we stand. In God we trust. It's not in united we stand or out of many one. All those things are wonderful, but ultimately it's based on that principle, one nation under God. And yet we have people playing God to the point of telling Christians and Christians telling each other and religious leaders saying, this year it's not going to be, and that's okay. We can always have it next year. When will the church actually stand up and say, no, that's not going to be the case. We're still going to have what we need to have. What would happen in America if every church finally woke up and said, no, this matters. This matters. Christ matters. And yes, we can be careful, but we cannot shut the light. Because the longer the light stays shut, the more and more the darkness begins to take over. Travel with me. Some of the places I went to in Greece and Israel, where through the centuries when the churches shut down, they never opened again. They're sitting in ruins. Just a monument of the past. Would you stand together?